My name is Lucas, and I grew up in a small town in Texas, just shy of the city limits, where the only things open after 11 p.m. were the 24-hour gas station and the Tacobell across the street from my house. Tacobell had been there as long as I could remember. I used to love the way its neon lights, purple and pink, glowed through my bedroom window at night. It was like the restaurant was always awake, buzzing with life even when the rest of the town was asleep. But things changed when I turned 9. It was the summer of 1998, and the town seemed quieter than ever. The days were long, stretching into the kind of oppressive Texas heat that made everything feel thick and sticky, even the air. I had grown used to the sounds of my parents' TV, the hum of the refrigerator, and the occasional distant sirens of passing police cars. Tacobell was my favorite place in town back then, mostly because it was one of the only places where I felt I could escape to. Just me and my bike, heading over for a cheap meal or just to hang out in the parking lot with friends. But one night, something happened that I could never explain, and to this day I still can't forget. That night changed everything. It was a Tuesday, or maybe it was a Wednesday. It doesn't really matter now, does it? What matters is the time, 3:17 a.m. I remember waking up abruptly, my heart pounding in my chest for no apparent reason. It wasn't the kind of panic you get from a nightmare, but the kind that makes your entire body freeze up, as if something were wrong. Something was wrong. I heard it then. The sound of 3 sharp raps against my bedroom window. My head snapped to the side, my eyes wide in the dark. The clock on my nightstand read 3:17 a.m. At first I told myself it was just a branch hitting the window, or maybe the wind or some other innocent explanation. But I knew. I just knew. I couldn't explain why, but something about the raps, the way they echoed in the dead of night, sent a chill straight down my spine. I slowly pulled myself out of bed, trying not to wake my parents in the next room. My feet barely made a sound on the wooden floor as I crept toward the window. My bedroom was on the 2nd floor, facing the parking lot of the Tacobell. I pulled back the curtain with trembling hands. What I saw through the glass will forever be burned into my memory. A man. No, not a man. A figure, dressed in a full Tacobell mascot costume, standing on the ground below. His head was huge, a giant taco shell with a ridiculous painted smile. That looked far too wide to be real. The mascot's suit was stained red, the kind of red you only get when grease and sauce are involved. His gloved hand was pressed flat against the window. His fingers splayed out like he was trying to reach me. For a moment I didn't move. I couldn't. My heart was racing so fast it felt like it might explode, but then I saw it. The smile. It twisted, pulling wider beneath the flickering streetlight, and it wasn't friendly anymore. It was something else. Something sinister. I had to get away from the window. I ran out of my room, tears blurring my vision, and crashed into my parents' room. My dad, a retired cop, didn't hesitate for a second. He grabbed his gun and jumped out of bed without even asking questions. I was too scared to speak. My mom was half awake, but my dad just nodded at her and motioned for me to stay back. "Stay here, Lucas," he told me in that firm voice of his, the one he used when he was serious. He had been through enough in his life that he could handle things most people couldn't. He wasn't afraid of much. I huddled in the hallway, listening as my dad stepped outside, his boots crunching on the gravel. Minutes passed. I could hear the creaking of the old house, the house I'd lived in all my life, and I waited, praying that whatever I'd seen outside wasn't real. Eventually, my dad came back inside. He was pale, his face taut with something I hadn't seen before. Something like unease. "There's nothing," he said after a long moment, looking at me with a strange expression. "Just Tacobell stuff." "Stuff?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. My dad didn't explain further, but when he went outside to check the yard, I followed him quietly, my curiosity burning a hole in my stomach. He didn't find much, just some taco sauce footprints leading away from the Tacobell dumpster. He also found something else, a half-eaten cinnamon twist stuck to the window screen, as if it had been placed there deliberately. "That's weird," my dad muttered, looking at the twist. I'll make a note of it. The next morning, I didn't get much sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was all a bad dream. But I couldn't shake the image of the Tacobell mascot's smile, wide and twisted, from my mind. My dad went to the local police station, but when I asked him what he found out, he just shook his head. "There's no sign of any break-in," he said. "The Tacobell manager says they don't have a mascot program, and they certainly don't have anyone working that late." "But what about the suit?" I asked, my voice rising. "What about the mascot?" I spoke with the manager. There's no record of any costume missing. He says that the costume was locked up in storage and no one's been in there after hours. I didn't know what to think. My dad, with all his experience in law enforcement, couldn't find anything. No sign of a trespasser, no explanation. For the mascot suit, it didn't make sense. The police report came back the next day. The officer's note read, "No evidence of trespass, possibly a prank. Recommend thicker curtains." I don't know why, but those words didn't make me feel better. They made everything feel worse. It wasn't a prank. I knew it wasn't a prank. But who would believe me? Time passed, but I couldn't forget that night. I couldn't forget the strange figure in the Tacobell mascot costume, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching me all along. My dad would often joke about it, saying it was probably some teenagers messing around, but I wasn't so sure. The Tacobell eventually closed in 2003, and the building was left abandoned for years. The once bright neon sign faded, the parking lot emptied, and the town moved on. But for me, the image of that mascot's twisted smile remained. It haunted me for years. And even now, as an adult, I can't look at a Crunchwrap without feeling uneasy. I still don't know who or what that figure was that night, and I don't think I'll ever find out. But one thing's for sure. Sometimes, the creepiest thing at Taco Bell isn't the food. It's the things that happen when the lights go out and no one is looking. Somewhere in Texas, there's a mildewed taco head in a storage unit, waiting for the next person to look too closely. I've worked the night shift as a janitor at the hospital in Albuquerque for a few years now. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. The shifts are long, and by the time I get off work, all I want is a warm breakfast and a hot cup of coffee to kickstart my day. Every morning without fail, I stop by the 24-hour Taco Bell on Central Avenue before heading home. It's a routine, a little comfort in my chaotic life. There's something about that breakfast crunch wrap that just hits right, especially after a 12-hour shift scrubbing floors and dealing with hospital nonsense. But that morning, it was different. I pulled up to the drive-thru at 6:15 a.m. like usual, but there was something off. The lot was quiet, too quiet, and the usual morning rush wasn't there. No cars parked in front. No one waiting for their breakfast. In fact, the neon sign outside was buzzing, but the doors were locked. I figured maybe they were cleaning or there was some issue with the staff, but still it felt wrong. Taco Bell never closed early, and breakfast usually brought in a crowd. I tugged at the door, expecting it to open, but the damn thing didn't budge. That's when I saw her. A face appeared in the window, a young woman in her 20s wearing the standard Taco Bell uniform. The name tag on her chest read Ashley, but it was crooked and barely hanging on. Sorry," she stammered, waving a hand nervously. "We're training new staff." "One sec." She ducked out of sight, leaving me standing outside, wondering why the hell I was locked out of a fast food restaurant I had visited hundreds of times. I stood there for a moment, the rising sun warming the pavement, wondering if I should just leave. But my stomach growled and I decided to wait. It didn't seem like they were just opening up. Something was off, but I didn't know what. After a minute, I heard the sound of a register ringing, followed by a loud crash from the kitchen. I knew I had to get inside. Something wasn't right. I waited outside for what felt like forever before I heard the loud slam of something heavy from behind the kitchen doors. I could have sworn I heard someone yell, but the words were muffled. Then came a deep voice that rattled me. I said, "No cheese, dumb bitch." I froze. I don't know why, but the tone in that voice made my blood run cold. It wasn't the kind of frustration you expect from a late-night fast food worker. It was angry, frantic. I could feel my heart race as I watched the kitchen door swing open. That's when I saw it. Ashley, standing at the register, her hands shaking. Her eyes flickered nervously around the room as if she didn't know what was happening either. I decided to take action and walk toward the door, knocking once before trying to twist the handle. It was locked. But then, I saw Ashley glance toward the back of the kitchen and her expression changed. I could tell something was wrong. She wasn't just nervous. She was panicked. I pushed against the door again, harder this time. It opened just enough for me to squeeze through, and I found myself in the familiar yet strange quiet of the Tacobell. The usual sounds of the grill sizzling or the microwave beeping were absent. There was no one else in sight. No manager, no other staff, just Ashley, staring at me with wide, almost too wide eyes. Before I could ask if everything was okay, I heard a crash, then a loud, angry shout. I said no cheese. It was coming from the kitchen. I rounded the counter to find what was causing the chaos. I turned the corner into the kitchen and saw him. The man behind the grill wasn't your average Taco Bell cook. His grease-stained apron was crumpled, and his hands were trembling as he slammed a spatula down on the counter. His wild eyes locked onto me as if I'd just interrupted something far more important than a breakfast order. "Ashley," he yelled, "get this shit right or I swear I'll..." But I couldn't hear the rest of what he said. My attention was drawn to Ashley, who was standing at the register, hands shaking as she cradled her face. A deep red mark was already forming on her cheek, and I could tell she was terrified. "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice louder than I intended. She looked up at me with wide, pleading eyes. "Roy's hungry," she said, her voice low and shaky. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something was off about her voice. It wasn't the usual tremor you'd expect from someone. Scared, it was deeper, almost guttural. "Roy?" I repeated, not understanding. Ashley's posture suddenly snapped rigid, her neck twisting unnaturally as her gaze locked onto me. "Roy's hungry," she shrieked in a voice that was so deep, it didn't sound like her at all. Before I could react, the man, the one I now knew was Roy, bolted out of the back door, disappearing into the alley behind the restaurant. I didn't know what the hell was going on, but it didn't feel right. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't leave her like this, not after what had just happened. I took a step back, my mind racing, trying to process everything I'd just witnessed. I wanted to run, but there was still something nagging at me, telling me I had to figure out what was going on. I turned toward the supply closet, hoping maybe there was some kind of explanation. I yanked open the door and froze. Inside, bound by duct tape, were the real Taco Bell staff. 3 of them, their eyes wide in fear. They were trying to move, but the tape was too strong, and they were stuck, unable to do anything but watch. I could barely breathe as I scanned the room. On the floor, I noticed something strange. Ashley's uniform was different. A hospital wristband dangled from her pocket. I leaned closer to read it. "Property of Bernalillo Comers Behavioral Health." My head spun. This wasn't a typical case of a messed up breakfast shift. This wasn't just a disgruntled worker. Something worse was going on. This wasn't Ashley. It was someone else. Someone who had stolen her identity and was living inside her. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed a stack of tortillas from the prep counter and hurled them at Ashley's head. The stack hit her with a soft slap, and she recoiled, letting out a hiss like a cornered animal. She crouched under the table, wrapping herself in hot sauce, packets like they were some kind of armor. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't care if she was chasing me or if she was going to come after me. I had to get out. I ran straight for the front door and yanked it open, bolting into the parking lot as if my life depended on it. I didn't stop until I reached my car, slamming the door behind me and starting the engine. My hands shook as I tried to dial 911, but I could barely hold my phone steady. My head was spinning and my heart was pounding in my chest. The Albuquerque Police Department arrived minutes later. They found Ashley, no, not Ashley, under the table, hissing and twitching like something out of a nightmare. They managed to subdue her, but it wasn't over. The man I had seen was also a patient from the same behavioral health facility. It turned out they had both escaped, and their identities had been switched. That Taco Bell hired a security guard after the incident, and I switched to breakfast burritos from home. As for the mystery of Ashley and Roy, I'll never forget the look in their eyes. Somewhere in the desert, there's probably a very confused psychiatrist trying to figure out how Baja Blast played a role in it all. It was the summer before my second year of community college, and I was doing whatever I could to scrape together enough cash. That's how I found myself working the graveyard shift at a 24-hour Taco Bell on the outskirts of Las Vegas. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady work. My coworker Jason was an older guy, mid-30s, and usually half asleep by the time my shift started at midnight. We'd both just be trying to make it through until 6 a.m. when the sun started to rise, and the world outside was a little less lonely. I'd done the graveyard shift for about a month at this point, and I was used to the usual oddballs that came through. Las Vegas at night tends to bring out the weirdness in people, but there was something about this night that felt different. The fluorescent lights above buzzed incessantly, and the air was thick with the faint scent of fast food grease and stale soda. At 1:30 a.m. the place was nearly empty, except for a few drunks coming in for late-night snacks, and Jason, who was back in the kitchen frying up the usual batch of tacos. Then he walked in. It was around 1:45 a.m. when the man in the trench coat appeared. I immediately felt a chill run through me, despite the 90-degree heat outside. He wasn't sweating or panting like most people who came in at that hour. Instead, he moved with a strange calmness, sliding into booth 7, the furthest from the door. I couldn't help but notice that his attire didn't match the weather. He wore a heavy, dark trench coat that seemed completely out of place in the desert. Heat. He had an air about him that made me uneasy. He didn't even look at the menu. He simply ordered 12 tacos. Not just one or two, 12. And yet, when I brought them to him, he didn't even touch them. He stacked them up in a neat pyramid like a strange taco-themed sculpture. He sat there completely still, staring at the security cameras, humming something under his breath. It was barely audible, but I could tell it was La Cucaracha. It made me uneasy. The song, combined with his eerie stillness, felt more like something from a horror movie than a fast food restaurant. At first I thought maybe he was just one of those weirdos who like to spend their nights in places like this. There were plenty of people like that in Vegas. People who lived off the neon glow of the Strip and just needed a place to sit and exist for a while. But as I watched him from behind the counter, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It was already past 2 a.m., and Jason had started the closing process, wiping down the counters and checking the restrooms. I had already started turning off the music in the dining area when I walked up to the man's table and politely said, "Sir, we're closing now." His response came immediately, a loud, harsh slam of his fist on the table. It startled me, and I jumped back, almost knocking over a stack of napkins. "I paid for my meal," he growled. "I'll leave when I want." The tone in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. Something about his eyes, wide, manic, told me he wasn't just an eccentric customer. He wasn't playing by the usual rules. This wasn't some drunk guy who'd been in too long. This was something darker. Jason, always the more level-headed one, approached to try to defuse the situation. He wasn't a small guy, but he wasn't exactly intimidating. As Jason stepped closer to ask if everything was okay, the man did something completely unexpected. He grabbed a hot sauce packet from his tray and threw it at Jason's head. The packet exploded on impact, staining his shirt with fiery red sauce. Jason staggered back, and I could see the surprise and anger flash in his eyes. That was when I knew for sure. This man was trouble. We both retreated to the locked manager's office, shutting ourselves in and dialing 911. It wasn't often that we had to call the police, but something about the man's erratic behavior felt dangerous. From the office window, we could see him clearly, his shadow stretching across the floor as he paced around the dining area. First, he smashed the salsa bar. He seemed to do it just for the hell of it, slamming the glass with his fist, shattering it in an explosion of red and orange sauce. Then, he moved to the soda machine, dumping ice onto the floor in a frenzy. the cubes scattering across the tiles like snowflakes. He wasn't even trying to get anything out of it. He was just destroying things for the sake of it. But the worst part, he didn't stop there. He turned and wrote something on the window. The words he scrawled in nacho cheese were almost poetic. "See you soon." I couldn't tell if he meant it as a threat or just some bizarre rambling, but my heart raced. It wasn't just the destruction, it was the way he seemed to enjoy it, like it was all part of some twisted game. By the time the police had arrived, the man had escalated his antics. He wasn't just sitting around anymore. No, now he was trying to deep fry his trench coat in the fryer. I could see it clearly through the window, his coat catching fire, in the hot oil as he shoved it in, screaming about the secret menu. It made no sense, but nothing about this situation made sense. The cops didn't hesitate. As soon as they stepped inside, the man charged at them, screaming incoherently about testing security for corporate and how they were all in on it. The officers tried to subdue him, but he wasn't going down without a fight. He was tased twice before finally collapsing on the floor, twitching as the electricity ran through him. I watched all of this from the safety of the manager's office, my hands shaking as I clutched the phone to my ear. I wasn't sure how long it had been since we first called the cops, but it felt like an eternity. The LVPD took the man into custody without incident after the tasers had done their work. He was identified as a disgruntled former Taco John's employee, and as strange as it sounded, he had been attempting to test the security for a corporate rival. A few minutes later, they discovered that the man had 37 stolen fire sauce packets in his pockets, making the whole thing even weirder. As for us, Jason and I stayed in the office for a long while, talking in hushed voices about what had just happened. The cops took the man away in handcuffs, and the mess he had left behind was, well, it was a mess. Salsa splattered on the walls, ice on the floor, and nacho cheese on the windows. It was like a scene out of a weird, twisted movie. My name is Dmitri, and it was just another one of those nights in Moscow where the city seemed to be hiding its best parts behind the usual smog and noise. I had just left my friend's place in Rubliovka, an area that feels like it could belong in another world compared to the rest of the city. We'd been out all night and I was exhausted, but oddly awake at the same time, caught in that strange limbo between exhaustion and the need to wind down. The drive home through the quieter parts of the city was always somewhat calming, the Lada Vesta sputtering beneath me like it was begging to be put out of its misery. I'm not a rich guy, and the Lada was just about the best I could afford. It wasn't glamorous, but it got me from point A to point B. As I parked in my underground garage around 2:17 a.m., the usual strange clanks and groans from the engine didn't sit well with me. I've had this car for a few years now, and the noises have become more frequent, like an old dog groaning when it's time to get up. I thought nothing of it at first, but the next morning, something wasn't right. At 3:45 a.m., I woke up to the unmistakable sound of metal grinding against metal. It was the kind of noise that makes your heart race without warning, especially when it's followed by muffled swearing in Chechen-accented Russian. Faint, but enough for me to know something was off. It was dark, and the air smelled like wet pavement, but I didn't hesitate. I pulled on a jacket and grabbed my keys, ready to confront whatever had disturbed my peace. What I found shocked me. I stumbled out into the garage, my shoes scraping against the concrete floor. The lights flickered as I approached the Lada. The car sat in its usual spot, but something was wrong. The rear light was smashed, and there were fresh key scratches all along the passenger side. It wasn't just a random act of vandalism. No, this was deliberate, and the way the scratches were made, deep, angled, and quick, told me someone was angry. I circled the car, my stomach turning with each step. Whoever had been here wasn't just messing around. A wrench was jammed into the fuel cap like a final insult. I tried to pry it out, but it stuck fast. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wreckage, trying to piece together what had happened. Then, something else caught my eye. The undercarriage of my Lada gleamed strangely in the dim light. A thin wire attached to a GPS tracker was hanging down from under the car. My pulse quickened. It wasn't factory installed. It was someone else's doing. Someone had been watching my car, had planned this. The realization settled over me, like a cold sweat. I pulled out my phone, already thinking of the next move. I didn't know who these people were, but I was damn sure I was going to find out. My first thought was to go to Kuznetsov Auto Repair near Taganskaya, where Igor, the mechanic, always did a good job. By the time I made it to Igor's shop, it was nearly noon. I felt like I hadn't slept at all, but there was no time for rest. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. "Dmitri, what's wrong with your car?" Igor asked as I pulled in, his voice always full of that same friendly gruffness. But even he seemed taken aback when I explained what had happened. "We need to take a look, see if there's anything else." Igor led me into the shop, and I parked the Lada inside the garage. As Igor got to work, I couldn't stop thinking about the tracker under my car. It was as if someone was specifically targeting me. Why? What did they want? Igor popped the hood open and started inspecting the engine. After a few moments of tinkering, he cursed under his breath. "Brake lines," he muttered. "They're partially cut. Someone knew what they were doing." My heart dropped. Whoever had been messing with my car wasn't just trying to scare me. They were trying to disable it. It was a professional job. I stood by watching Igor work, but then he called me over. "Look here," he said, pointing to the seat. Beneath the cushions was another surprise, a hidden GPS device not factory installed. And the smell in the cabin? Shawarma. It was faint, but definitely there. Someone had been in my car, and whoever had been in there had no intention of letting me go without watching me. I could feel the pieces coming together, but there were too many unanswered questions. I needed something to calm my nerves, so I decided to grab a bite. My stomach growled, and I realized I hadn't eaten since last night. There was a 24-hour Tacobell near Arbat Street, one of the only places still open at this hour. Maybe a Crunchwrap Supreme would help me think straight. The drive there was short, but as I parked and got out, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was almost as if the same eyes that had been on my car were now watching me. I stood in line, eyes scanning the place like a hawk, and that's when I noticed him, a man in a mask lurking by the drink station staring directly at my Lada. I tried to shrug it off, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, had me on edge. I ordered my food and tried to keep my cool, but then I saw someone else. A hooded figure near the entrance of the restaurant, suspiciously filming the parking lot. It wasn't normal. None of it was. I had to know what was going on, so I decided to send the footage from my garage CCTV to my cousin at the Moscow PD. He could help me out. The response came within minutes. The masked man's boots were distinctive, Adidas stripes that matched those of a car theft ring active in the western district of Moscow, and the hooded figure. It was a known associate seen on camera near my apartment last week riding a modified Ural motorcycle. I wasn't about to let this slide. I decided to stay a little longer at Tacobell, pretending to leave, but instead circling the block to get a closer look. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. The hooded figure was in my car, attaching a tracker to the undercarriage, the same tracker that had been in my garage earlier. I felt my stomach drop. They were targeting me. I looked over at the masked man who was standing by the drink station, speaking into a walkie-talkie in low tones. It was clear now. They were monitoring me, and it wasn't just a simple robbery. This was bigger than that. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone and called my cousin, alerting him to the situation. Within minutes, an Oman patrol unit arrived. They arrested the masked man and the hooded figure, who was caught with carjacking tools hidden in a Taco Bell sauce. They also found a list of luxury vehicles on his phone, including mine, and maps marking my home and workplace. I was 8 years old, and I thought I was invincible. The under-9s football team I played for had just won our first match of the season, and my parents promised me a treat. They said we'd go to Taco Bell in Manchester City Centre, a place I thought was the height of luxury at the time. The bright neon sign flickers against the rainy evening sky, lighting up the otherwise dull stretch of road. I remember walking in with my parents, the smell of beans and melted cheese filling the air. It was a typical Taco Bell, a little outdated, with worn-out booths and that play area in the back. It was the kind of place where kids like me could burn off some energy after scarfing down burritos. My parents ordered our food, and I was given the green light to head over to the kids' corner, which featured a plastic cactus climbing frame, a slide, and a couple of tunnels to crawl through. The space smelled faintly of disinfectant and stale food, but I loved it. The idea of being able to climb and play freely made me feel like I had escaped into a different world, away from the rules of the real one. I dashed towards the tunnels, barely paying attention to the hum of the overhead lights and the distant chatter of other diners. As I squeezed through the narrow openings, my excitement got the best of me. I wasn't paying attention to much else until I noticed something that made me freeze for a moment. A man was standing at the entrance of the tunnels. He wasn't a staff member, but he was wearing an ill-fitting Taco Bell polo, one that didn't have a name tag. His posture was awkward, crouched down, and his eyes seemed to focus on me in a way that didn't feel right. He smiled, but it wasn't a warm, friendly kind of smile. It was the kind of smile that made me feel uneasy, like he had no real reason to be there. I remember the man's voice clearly. "Your mom sent me," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "Says to meet her at the staff car park for a special churro." I couldn't place it at first, but something about the situation felt wrong. My mom hadn't said anything to me about a special churro, and I certainly didn't think it would involve this strange man in a dirty Taco Bell shirt. There was no name tag on his uniform, no ID badge, nothing that indicated he was a legitimate employee. As he crouched at the entrance of the tunnel, he seemed to be trying to look friendly. But I noticed little things that made me suspicious. His trousers were black jeans, not the usual Taco Bell slacks, but casual jeans that looked out of place. And his shoes, muddy trainers, completely inappropriate for working in a food environment. Staff at Taco Bell always wore slip-resistant shoes, but these were completely wrong. His eyes kept flicking toward the fire exit, and it made me wonder if he had an escape route planned. I hesitated, unsure of what to do. I stood still for a moment, considering my options. The man's gaze didn't leave me, and that was when I began to feel a sense of dread creep up on me. What if he wasn't just a strange person working at Taco Bell? What if he had other intentions? He took a step closer, and that's when I knew for sure. This wasn't a simple misunderstanding. Something wasn't right. Without thinking, I turned and scrambled through the tunnel, desperate to get away from him. My heart raced as I crawled to the other side, hoping I could find my parents and tell them what happened. But when I emerged from the tunnel, I saw something that made my heart stop. Through the large windows, I could see my dad's car, the Vauxhall, still running at the collection point outside, waiting for us to leave. But it was odd. My dad never left the engine running for so long. Was he waiting for me, or had the man tricked me somehow? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't just walk out there and meet him. That's when the man's hand grabbed my arm, pulling me back toward the entrance. I struggled to break free, but his grip was strong. The panic hit me like a wave, and I thought of the worst-case scenario. I could feel his fingers digging into my skin, his breath on the back of my neck. I needed to act fast. I stomped as hard as I could on his foot. It was a desperate, instinctual move, but it worked. The man yelped in pain and let go of my arm. I didn't hesitate. I bolted toward the kitchen, weaving through the tables and dodging other customers as I ran. I was so scared I could hardly breathe, but I knew I needed to get to safety. I had no idea what this man's intentions were, but I didn't plan on finding out. I crashed into someone as I sprinted toward the back of the restaurant. I barely registered the person I collided with before I looked up and saw who it was. Fatima, the assistant manager. She was carrying a bin bag and didn't seem startled by my sudden appearance. But she immediately took in my frantic expression and understood something was wrong. "What's going on?" she asked, her tone sharp. I couldn't explain the whole situation in the heat of the moment, but I didn't need to. Fatima's sharp eyes scanned the area, and she quickly understood. She grabbed my hand, leading me to the staff area where the back door was. Just as she was about to call for help, the man appeared in the doorway, looking confused and disoriented. He didn't chase us, but there was something in his movements that made me feel like he was trying to figure out what had gone wrong. His gaze was still fixed on me, but Fatima stepped in front of me, her posture protective. The police arrived within minutes. Fatima had already called them, and they took charge immediately. The man was nowhere to be found, but the authorities had surveillance footage of the whole incident. The footage revealed that he had been in the restaurant for hours before approaching me, and he had been acting suspiciously from the start. The police later found a uniform top, one of Tacobell's, discarded in the disabled toilet. The man had stolen it from a laundry trolley earlier that day. They also spotted a suspicious Citroën van speeding down Corporation Street, matching the vehicle that had been parked outside. The police gathered all the evidence and began investigating his background. When they found his unfinished Baja Blast on the counter, I shuddered. It was like he had been in the middle of blending in, but had lost control when I ran away.